Hello, everyone. Dr. Clark here. Let's talk about a frustration I hear about nearly every single day in my practice. It goes something like this. Doc, I don't get it. I ate a healthy dinner. I took my medication. I went to bed with a good blood sugar reading, feeling like I had won the day. But I wake up, I test my blood, and the number on that little screen is sky high. It feels like my body is betraying me while I sleep. If that thought has ever crossed your mind, I want you to know you are absolutely not alone. This is one of the most common and maddening challenges for anyone managing their blood sugar, especially as we get older. It's a warning shot from your body, a sign that something in your nightly routine is fundamentally out of sync with your physiology. And today, we are going to get to the bottom of it. Let me tell you about Arthur. Arthur is a 72-year-old retired engineer, a man who lives by data and details. He tracked every carbohydrate he ate, walked 2 miles every afternoon, and never missed his medication. By all accounts, he was a model patient. Yet his morning blood sugar was consistently in the 170s, sometimes touching 180. He brought me spreadsheets, beautifully organized, showing perfect post-dinner numbers, but every morning, that high reading stared back at him. He was frustrated, on the verge of giving up. He felt like he was doing everything right, but still failing the test every single morning. What Arthur was experiencing, and what many of you might be experiencing, is often due to a completely natural process called the dawn phenomenon. Here's the science, made simple. Between the hours of about 3 a.m. and 8 a.m., your body gets a natural surge of hormones, including cortisol and growth hormone. Think of it as your body's internal alarm clock, getting you ready to wake up and face the day. These hormones trigger your liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream, providing energy for your morning. For someone without diabetes, their pancreas simply releases a little extra insulin to handle this sugar surge, and they never even notice it. But if you have insulin resistance, or your body doesn't produce enough insulin, the hallmark of type 2 diabetes, you don't have that compensatory release. Your insulin can't keep up. So, this morning glucose delivery, which is meant to help you, ends up flooding your system. It's like a scheduled delivery arriving at your doorstep, but the person who is supposed to sign for it and put it away is asleep on the job. The packages just pile up on the porch. As we age, our hormonal regulation can become less precise, and our insulin sensitivity can decrease, making this phenomenon even more pronounced. So, while your body is just trying to do its job, it's working against your efforts to maintain control. Does this cycle of waking up to a high number, despite your best efforts, sound painfully familiar? Have you ever felt that sense of dread right before you prick your finger in the morning, fearing what the meter will say? Understanding this mechanism is the first step, because it's not your fault, it's your physiology. But the good news is, we can influence it. We can give our body the support it needs overnight, starting with what we do long before our head even hits the pillow. Now that we understand that our bodies are naturally programmed to release sugar in the early morning hours, let's talk about the first and perhaps most common mistake that pours gasoline on that fire: eating too close to bedtime. I see this constantly. People finish dinner around 6:30 or 7, and then around 9:30, while watching television or reading, they feel a little peckish. It might be a bowl of cereal, a few cookies, a dish of ice cream, or even something seemingly healthy, like a piece of fruit or some crackers. They think, it's just a small snack, what harm can it do? The harm is in the timing. This is mistake number 1, the late-night snack sabotage. I had a patient, Eleanor, a wonderful 78-year-old grandmother. Her A1C was creeping up, and her high morning numbers were the primary cause. When we dug into her daily routine, she swore she was eating well. But after some gentle questioning, she admitted her little secret. Every night, around 10 p.m., she would have a small bowl of oatmeal with raisins, because she read it was heart-healthy. While oatmeal can be a fine choice for breakfast, for Eleanor, it was a disaster at 10 p.m. She was essentially loading her system with carbohydrates right at the moment her body was least equipped to handle them. Her body was trying to wind down for sleep, her metabolism was slowing, and her insulin sensitivity was at its lowest point of the day. Let's look at the simple physiology here. Digestion is an active process that requires energy and efficient metabolic function. As we sleep, our body naturally slows everything down to focus on repair and restoration. This includes our digestive system. After the age of 60, this slowing process is often more pronounced. So, when you eat a carbohydrate-rich snack close to bed, that glucose enters your bloodstream much more slowly and erratically than it would during the day. Think of it like a highway at rush hour versus at 3 a.m. During the day, traffic moves along efficiently. But that late-night snack is like trying to merge onto a highway where most of the lanes are closed for construction. The glucose just backs up, creating a traffic jam in your bloodstream that lingers for hours. It then combines with the glucose being released by your liver due to the dawn phenomenon, creating a perfect storm for that shockingly high morning reading. Eleanor's heart-healthy oatmeal was creating a sugar logjam that lasted all night. This is why I am a firm believer in the 3-hour rule. Try to have your last substantial bite of food at least 3 hours before you go to bed. This gives your body ample time to digest and process the majority of the glucose from your meal before it enters that slowed-down, sleep-time state. If you absolutely must have something because you are feeling true hunger or your numbers are a bit low, choose wisely. Ditch the carbs. Instead, opt for a small handful of almonds, a slice of cheese, or a spoonful of plain Greek yogurt. These are primarily protein and fat, which are digested much more slowly and have a minimal, blunted impact on your blood sugar. We switched Eleanor's oatmeal to a few walnuts and a cup of herbal tea. Within a week, her morning numbers dropped by 30 points. It was that simple. So, I ask you, what is the last thing you eat or drink before you turn in for the night? Could that innocent-seeming snack be the hidden saboteur of your morning success? All right, we've cleared the kitchen 3 hours before bedtime. The next critical area we need to examine is the medicine cabinet. This brings us to the second major mistake I see wrecking morning blood sugar control: medication mismatches and timing troubles. It is a deeply frustrating reality that you can be taking the exact right medication, prescribed by your doctor, but if you take it at the wrong time of day, you can completely undermine its effectiveness, especially during that crucial overnight period. It's not just about what you take, but when you take it. Let me tell you about George. He was 69, a retired postal worker who was diligent about his health. He was prescribed a long-acting insulin, a type designed to provide a steady background level of insulin over a 24-hour period. George had gotten into the habit of taking his shot every morning with his breakfast, along with his other pills. It was just easier to remember that way. His blood sugar was reasonably well controlled throughout the day, but his morning numbers remained stubbornly high, often over 200. He felt defeated, thinking he needed a higher and higher dose, which he was reluctant to do. When he came to see me, we went over his medication schedule in minute detail. The problem wasn't the dose, it was the timing. Here's the science behind it. A long-acting insulin, like Basaglar or Lantus, doesn't cause a big, immediate drop in blood sugar like a mealtime insulin does. Instead, it has a very long, flat action profile. It's like a slow, steady drip that keeps your base-level sugar in check. However, for many of these insulins, their peak effectiveness doesn't last the full 24 hours. The effect can start to wane after about 20 to 22 hours. For George, taking his shot at 8 a.m. meant that by 4 or 5 a.m. the next morning, right when the dawn phenomenon was kicking into high gear and his liver was pumping out sugar, his insulin was at its weakest point. It was like sending a firefighter home right before the fire alarm goes off. By simply switching his long-acting insulin shot to the evening, around 9 p.m., we ensured that the insulin was at its maximum strength during those critical pre-dawn hours, ready and waiting to handle the liver's glucose release. His morning numbers came down into the 130s within days, without changing the dose at all. The same principle applies to oral medications. Metformin, for instance, works in part by telling the liver to produce less glucose. Taking an extended-release version of metformin with your evening meal can be particularly effective at dampening that overnight sugar production. But if you take it in the morning, much of its liver-suppressing power may have worn off by the next morning. The key is to match the medication's peak action with your body's greatest need. For morning highs, that need is almost always between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. My practical advice is this. First, and most importantly, never change your medication timing without speaking to your doctor, but do have that conversation. Ask them directly, is the timing of my medication optimized to control the dawn phenomenon? Second, make it foolproof. Set a recurring daily alarm on your phone labeled Evening Meds. Use a 7-day pill organizer and place it right next to your toothbrush or the remote control for the TV. Somewhere you simply can't miss it before you settle in for the night. So, take a moment to think. When do you currently take your diabetes medication? Have you and your doctor ever specifically discussed timing it to combat high morning readings? We've addressed food and we've addressed medication. Now we need to talk about a powerful, invisible force that can send your morning blood sugar soaring, your mental and emotional state in the hours before you go to sleep. Mistake number 3 is underestimating the impact of evening stress and screen time. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, and this often continues right up until the moment we close our eyes. This habit of staying plugged in is not just bad for our sleep, it is a direct trigger for the hormonal cascade that raises blood sugar. I worked with a patient named Brenda, a 68-year-old retired teacher who was doing everything else right. Her diet was clean, her medication timing was perfect, but her morning glucose was erratic and often high. When we talked about her evening routine, a clear picture emerged. After dinner, she would watch the national news, which often left her feeling anxious and upset. Afterward, to unwind, she would lie in bed and scroll through social media or news articles on her tablet for an hour. She thought this was relaxing, but physiologically, it was the exact opposite. She was marinating her brain in stress and blue light, creating a recipe for high morning blood sugar. Let's break down the science. When your brain perceives stress, whether it's from a frightening news report, an argument, or even just the constant, low-grade anxiety of scrolling through an endless feed, it activates your fight-or-flight response. This triggers the release of hormones, most notably cortisol. Cortisol is essentially a survival hormone. It tells your body to prepare for a physical threat by making energy readily available. And how does it do that? By signaling your liver to dump glucose into your bloodstream. This is the very same mechanism as the dawn phenomenon, but you are artificially triggering it with stress before you even go to sleep. On top of that, the blue light emitted from our phones, tablets, and televisions directly suppresses the production of melatonin, the hormone that tells your body it's time to sleep. When melatonin is low and cortisol is high, you get poor quality, fragmented sleep, which itself is another major stressor on the body that further impairs insulin sensitivity. Brenda was essentially sending her body into a state of high alert right at the time it needed to be powering down. Her evening wind down was actually a wind-up routine. The solution was to create a new, non-negotiable protocol for her evenings. We called it the digital sunset. At 9 p.m. every night, the TV went off and the tablet was plugged in to charge in the kitchen, not the bedroom. Her last hour of the day was now reserved for calming, screen-free activities. She started reading novels again, listening to calming classical music, and doing gentle stretching exercises. She took up drinking a cup of chamomile tea. It felt strange at first, but after about a week she reported not only sleeping more deeply than she had in years, but her morning blood sugar numbers had stabilized in a way she hadn't thought possible. She had removed the hormonal trigger. So, I want you to ask yourself honestly, what does the last hour of your day truly look like? Is it a period of genuine peace and tranquility? Or is it filled with the stressful glow of a screen? We have now established a clear pre-bedtime plan. We've stopped eating 3 hours before bed, we've optimized our medication timing, and we've created a calming, screen-free wind-down routine. You might think you're all set. But there is one final, crucial step that far too many people skip, and it's the fourth mistake: flying blind by not performing a bedtime blood sugar check. Going to bed without knowing your blood sugar number is like starting a cross-country road trip without checking your gas gauge. You might be fine, or you might end up stranded halfway through the night. That final check is your last chance to gather critical data and make a course correction before you sign off for the next 8 hours. Let me tell you about Frank. Frank was a 75-year-old man who hated pricking his finger. He did it in the morning because his doctor told him to, but he figured checking it at night was overkill. "I feel fine, Doc," he'd say, "so my sugar must be fine." He assumed that if his dinner was healthy, his number before bed would naturally be in a good range. This assumption was setting him up for failure night after night. His morning numbers were consistently high, and he couldn't understand why. He was following all the other rules, but he was missing his starting number. The science here is incredibly straightforward. Your bedtime blood sugar reading is the starting line for the overnight marathon. Your body is going to be dealing with the dawn phenomenon, which will naturally push your numbers up. If your starting number is already elevated, say 175 or 180 mHdL, you have absolutely no chance of waking up in your target range. The hormonal surge overnight will only add to that already high number. It's simple math. You are starting the race from behind. Conversely, if your number is too low before bed, you risk a hypoglycemic event overnight, which can be dangerous. Your body might then overcorrect, releasing a flood of stored sugar in response, a phenomenon known as the Somogyi effect, which also results in a very high morning reading. Without that bedtime check, you have no idea which of these scenarios is playing out. Getting this data allows you to take control. My practical advice is to establish a target range for your bedtime blood sugar with your doctor. For many of my senior patients, a safe and effective range is somewhere between 100 and 140 mg/dL. Checking your sugar right before you turn out the lights gives you actionable information. Is your number 170? Perhaps a brief 10-minute walk around the house or doing a few dishes is enough to bring it down into a better starting range. Is it 90? That might be too low to be safe overnight, and a small protein-focused snack, like a piece of cheese or a few nuts, would be a wise preventative measure. When Frank finally agreed to check his blood sugar every night for 1 week, he was shocked. He discovered that on several nights his feeling fine corresponded with a glucose level of over 180. He had been starting his nights in a deficit without even knowing it. Armed with this new data, he could make small adjustments, a slightly smaller portion of potatoes at dinner, a short walk after eating, to ensure his starting number was in that 100-140 range. That one change, that single piece of data, was the key to finally unlocking his mornings. So, let me ask you, do you truly know what your blood sugar is when your head hits the pillow? Are you relying on a feeling, or are you relying on the data you need to ensure a successful night? We have now dissected the 4 most common bedtime mistakes that lead to high morning blood sugar. We've talked about the late-night snack sabotage, medication timing troubles, the havoc caused by evening stress and screens, and the danger of flying blind without a bedtime check. Now, let's put it all together. Let's build the perfect bedtime protocol. A simple, repeatable routine that addresses each of these issues and sets you up for success. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being consistent. Let's go back to my patient, Arthur, the meticulous engineer I mentioned at the beginning. He was the one with the spreadsheets, who did everything right during the day but was still waking up with high numbers. This is the exact protocol we implemented for him. Think of it as a simple timeline. Around 8 p.m., this is your kitchen cutoff. The last substantial bite of food is consumed. The kitchen is now closed for the night except for water or herbal tea. Around 9:00 p.m. This is medication time. The alarm on his phone goes off and he takes his long-acting insulin and his evening metformin. No exceptions. From 9:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. This is the digital sunset. The television is turned off. The phone is plugged in to charge in another room. This hour is for winding down. For Arthur, this meant reading a history book or listening to quiet jazz music. At 10:30 p.m., this is the final data check. He pricks his finger and checks his blood glucose. He's aiming for that 140 DL sweet spot. If it's a little high, he might do a few laps around his living room. If it's a little low, he'll have a small handful of walnuts. By 11 p.m., lights out. Arthur followed this protocol religiously. For the first few days, the change was minimal, and he was skeptical. But he trusted the process. By the end of the first week, he woke up to a reading of 135. For him, it was a miracle. By the end of the second week, his morning numbers were consistently in the 120s and 130s. He felt a sense of control over his health that he hadn't felt in years. Each step in this protocol directly counters a physiological challenge. The food cutoff prevents an overnight glucose load. The timed medication provides hormonal support when it's needed most. The digital sunset lowers cortisol. And the final check ensures a safe and effective starting line for the night. Now, what if you do all of this and your numbers are still high? This is where you become a health detective. For 1 full week, I want you to keep a simple log. Note what you ate for dinner, your bedtime glucose, your morning glucose, and your stress level. This data is gold. Take that log to your doctor. It helps them differentiate between the dawn phenomenon, which might require a medication adjustment, and the Somogyi effect, that rebound from an overnight low, which might require reducing medication. You cannot manage what you do not measure. Your morning number is not a pass-fail grade. It is a piece of information. It is a clue. And with the right routine and the right data, you and your doctor can solve this puzzle. You have the power to take back your mornings.